everybody. Okay, so everybody got their Zoom tablets? Playing with them? All right. Well, hopefully it's been an enormously exciting day for you all. I know it has been for all of us Boxers. We're having a great time at this first conference. And I thought I'd spend a little time talking to you about, well, at least on the agenda, it's labeled as talking a little bit about the journey of content management and how it's gone from sucky to sexy. So I'm going to tell you a story, and along the way I'll tell you a little about me, since I didn't get much of a chance to introduce myself to you earlier. And then, of course, we'll introduce our last featured speaker of the day. So let me kind of take you back about 15 years. And I've talked to enough of you in the audience to know there are some of you that will remember these days firsthand. You know, back in the mid-90s or so, we actually saw a really interesting time in technology. We saw all sorts of different technology solutions booming everywhere around content in some form or fashion. Content management tools, collaboration tools. Everyone was talking about knowledge management. Remember that? Right? Tacit knowledge and explicit knowledge and all that fun stuff. And those tools were kind of running rampant, frankly. There were tools to do everything, and they were all separate. So you had XML management tools and document management tools and web content management tools and rich media tools. You remember all this stuff, right? And the unfortunate thing about all that was that they were all doing kind of sort of the same thing at their base core, which is helping to aggregate and distribute content in a meaningful way. But they all did it slightly differently. And so, of course, companies were burdened with all these disparate systems and silos of information. And, of course, users needed to get at this stuff from all these different systems easily, and yet they couldn't because they had to go to 6 different places. So out of this whole mess was born this concept, which I admittedly helped to create and further, called enterprise content management. Well, why wouldn't you just sort of blend all these technologies into one massive platform that solved all these problems, let you aggregate content of any kind, and mix and match what you needed for different audiences and user communities, which sounded in principle like a pretty good idea. Don't need 6 or 7 systems anymore. You can just use one. It's better, it's faster, it's bigger, it's all that, and more expensive, of course. So thus was born ECM, and we all had our struggles with that over the years, but it's turned out to be some pretty rich technology that probably most of you in the room have invested in some way, shape, or form over the last decade. And I think what was really interesting is that ECM didn't really ever materialize exactly the way it was envisioned from the outset. All those technologies never quite merged into one. Lots of them did, but not all of them. You know, think for a moment about web publishing. That's still kind of a separate process with its own separate tools, with its own set of processes specific to publishing information to websites. So that never quite made its way fully into the ECM suite. And the same thing's kind of true around digital asset management or rich media handling, where long-form video and short-form video and rich media and things take a lot of special handling. Everything from full-text indexing, closed caption copy or subtitle text, to clip editing and all sorts of streaming demands and so on and so forth. And that, too, kind of remained a little bit specialized. And so ECM sort of ended up, a few of those silos kind of popped back out, and ECM sort of really ended up being most appropriate for these bet your business on it, super important back office applications that most often were very process-centric, decision-heavy, and were very much about compliance, which is a pretty tough set of problems to solve. So that ECM technology is so well suited to doing those things and is really what those systems of record that Jeff Moore talked about earlier today. So that's all great. Those systems are in use, and those are really geared toward the users that operate within those business processes, right? So kind of a select set of folks that are really working on that back office, bet your business on it kind of stuff. But the mass community of kind of the everyday knowledge worker, the people that just need to get to their stuff in a timely fashion and know they're working with current information, were not really addressed with most of those ECM systems. It wasn't really designed to be perfectly attuned to the lightweight use case of the everyday worker. And so along comes this idea called SharePoint. And SharePoint, before it really got out into the market, was going to be the panacea, right? The tool for the masses, the one that everybody could use in a lightweight form or fashion, as opposed to the ECM stuff for the more compliance and decision-heavy stuff. And then SharePoint comes out. You guys remember the term basic content services started being thrown around, and everyone was pretty excited about that, kind of the other end of the spectrum, if you will, from the other high-end solutions from ECM providers. And so we saw SharePoint hit the market, and you know what? It really wasn't basic content services. Not even Microsoft wanted it positioned that way. You know, it's pretty feature-rich, and it's got a configurable toolkit. And frankly, Microsoft wanted to see it positioned much more toward ECM. And truth be told, SharePoint with its configurations and tools and customizations and all that kind of stuff, frankly, was much closer to the same end of the spectrum that the ECM vendors were on than anything that the mass user community at this end of the spectrum really wanted. And I think that's why that whole end of the spectrum has seen adoption by select user communities where it really makes sense, but not very often is it on every single user's device or desktop. And so this kind of unaddressed masses are hungering for a solution that's simple enough that they can just get to their stuff, right? Now, take that whole conversation aside for a moment and think about the technological revolution, a lot of which Mark Andreessen and I were talking about this morning, of what was happening with the consumerization of IT in its earliest days. We started to see the emergence of mobile, right? So mobile and smartphones became much more normal and expected. Everyone's got one. Internet access is rampant everywhere. We're starting to see the emergence of Facebook and then Twitter and all these wonderful communication and social tools that help us interact with the people and causes and events and things that we care about in a way that's pretty powerful and really simple and available anywhere. So those things start to take off, and now we've got, you know, these differing expectations in the workplace where working that way becomes a big desire of that same group of kind of unaddressed masses that just need to get to their stuff. So that kind of starts to form the perfect storm. And guess when Box was born? Right about that time, when that unaddressed mass of people really were thirsting for a solution to just get to their stuff, coupled with this technological wave that made getting to your stuff a whole lot easier and a lot more interesting, and the ability to share and interact with others who care about the same stuff becomes sort of the normal way of interacting online. Well, that really is kind of a perfect storm, and I think why you guys and others like you have chosen Box, because it's that lightweight solution for everyone, for the masses, if you will, that just need to get to their stuff when they need it and know that it's safe, secure, current, and available whenever I want it, wherever I want it. And that's kind of what I see as that really interesting journey between, or from, you know, enterprise, traditional on-prem to sexy, to doing something that users love to use, that they get excited about using, that is the thing that they would choose to use at home. And I think back on Jeff Moore's comment today about, why am I so powerful at home and so lame in the office, right? I thought that was a great quote. And, you know, if Box does one thing, it's to make you powerful in the office and to do it with tools that people really enjoy and still be able to look a CIO in the face and say, your content is safe with Box. And that's really, I think, a great journey and a wonderful solution to this kind of unaddressed mass set of people who've been looking for something for so long, and complements the other end of the spectrum where all these bet your business on it applications remain so important and where you've invested so much. Now, my journey along this has also been, well, parallel perhaps. You know, as I said, I started with Documentum back in 1995, and I was just talking to one of my old customers, Allergan, who I've worked with a lot over the last 15, 20 years, and saying, you know, there's no bigger champion of what Documentum stands for than me. I have a ton of personal investment in what that company means and the kinds of problems that it's trying to solve. But I also couldn't be a bigger champion for Box, because I really believe in the problems we're trying to solve. And for me, you know, joining Documentum when it was 60 people and $10, $12 million in revenue, tiny little company, you know, taking us through roughly 15 or 16 acquisitions before we actually decided to be acquired by EMC in late 2003. And at that time, we were about 350 million, I think. Stuck through that with EMC and really had a wonderful journey of learning a lot about a really big corporation and how to work integrations with acquired technologies and starting to look at how things like content management can be leveraged in whole new ways. But after a number of years at EMC, I was kind of hankering for that small company, that agile environment, that fun camaraderie where we all want to work really, really hard and all have our eye on the brass ring and we're all just running as fast as we can to get there. And so I was looking for something that was, well, actually I had 5 criteria I'll share with you. So as I started looking around the market, I said, I want a company that's, well, first and foremost, I'm not driving like 2 hours every day to work. So it's got to be between Palo Alto and San Francisco because I live here in the city. And got to be small and exciting. So kind of the 20 to 100 million-ish phase. Has to have a very dynamic executive team. Boy, got that in spades, huh? and who's really fun and excited and energetic and passionate about what they do and needs someone else like that. And that has you know, a fast-growing customer community and all that good stuff. And oh, by the way, if your technology is more than 5 years old, I'm not interested. I was absolutely going to look for something new, nimble, modern, and sexy that I could be part of. And boy, did I find it in Box. So that's kind of how I got here. Now, I'm going to echo back to a couple things that I find really compelling about Box, the principles that we hold very dear as an entire company when we think about how to create products and capabilities that you can benefit from and that you'll love and use. You heard Aaron talk a lot about a commitment to simplicity, and I think that's really, in a lot of ways, our secret sauce. You know, again, giving tools that users love and would choose to use on their own time, and yet we can say to an IT organization, your information is safe with Box, is a pretty compelling thing. But that simplicity is not the traditional software that we've all grown up with. So keeping that focus on simplicity is so important. You heard us talk about openness, about making sure that we can integrate into all sorts of different applications so that we can take Box-managed content and surface it wherever it makes sense to make users more productive in whatever environment they want to work in and whatever device they want to work on. You also heard us talk about the commitment to mobile and some of our great partnership announcements today with HP and with Motorola and so on, and the mobile device manufacturers as well, are really critically important. You know, it's a little early to say the desktop is dead, but if it isn't mobile, it's just not as productive. And of course, we all, through all of that, are incredibly dedicated to making sure that we delight you, that we make sure that you're happy, that you're enjoying the products and the service of Box, that you're getting the most out of your investment, and that you feel like you've partnered with a company who really cares that you're enjoying what you do with Box and that we're helping you do your business things better. And that commitment to delighting our customers is something that you should hold us to. And tell us when we're not. Tell us when we're not delighting you, because that's something we have to fix. If you're not happy, we're not happy. So I guess at the end, it's all about delivering happiness. And I am thrilled to have with us today the master of delivering happiness, the CEO of Zappos, Tony Hsieh, who wrote a book by the same name, Delivering Happiness. So please welcome Tony Hsieh to the stage to tell us a little bit about that. Thanks, Tony.
So so the book actually came out last year, and I'm just going to flip through some pictures real quick from our book tour last year. But while I'm flipping through, I wanted to take a quick survey. How many of you have heard of Zappos prior to this? And how many of you have actually shopped with us before? Okay, so very cool. So normally when I do this survey, the ratio is actually about 2 to 1 women to men. And a lot of men I ask say they haven't personally shopped from us, but their wives or significant others have. And a lot of times it's actually on their behalf. And I was giving a tour. We're actually based out of Las Vegas, and we offer tours to the public. A few years ago, I was giving a tour to an executive from one of the major record labels, and if any of you have not taken a tour, would definitely recommend you come for a tour. We'll pick you up from the airport in a Zappos shuttle. Tour takes about an hour, drop you off at the hotel afterwards. And let me just flip over to our offices. And so the tour that I was giving to an executive of one of the major record labels went through the ground floor, which is where our merchandising team is, and then I asked him the exact same question. Had he bought from us before? And he said no, he hadn't personally bought from us, but he suspected his wife had, because these white boxes would show up on his doorstep, and then they'd disappear, and he had no idea what was going on. You know, was she buying them, exchanging them, returning them? And every time he asked her, she would just flat out refuse to answer him and change the subject. So the ground floor is our merchandising department, and then we go upstairs to our customer loyalty team, which is our name for our call center. And we have this whiteboard there where we have all the stats from our call center. How many calls we took yesterday, percent of calls we took and answered in under 20 seconds, sales, and so on. And as I'm explaining through all the different stats, I turn around and he's disappeared. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And so I kind of backtrack, and then I went down a couple aisles. Turns out he had actually gone down halfway one of the aisles and sat down next to one of our customer service reps and forced her to pull up his wife's account. And he discovered that she had spent over $62,000 in her lifetime. So, yeah, hopefully we weren't instrumental to any divorce proceedings or anything like that. So, actually, before getting into Zappos, we want to talk about what led me to Zappos. And the story actually begins with pizza. This was in college back in 93, 94. I was living in a dorm where there was 300 or 400 students in the dorm, and there was this area set aside on the ground floor, which was a kitchen area, and every year different students could take control of that area and start their own little small business. So my roommate and I, my roommate Sanjay, we decided to get into the pizza business. So we invested in pizza ovens and dealt with suppliers and hired other employees who were basically students, and then ended up, a lot of times I was making the pizzas myself. And this guy named Alfred, who actually later on ended up becoming the CFO at Zappos, this is actually how we met. He would stop by every night and order a large pepperoni pizza from me, which wasn't actually that weird because I had heard about Alfred's reputation for eating a lot. He had nicknames like Human Trash Compactor, Monster, and so on. And later on, when we became friends, I actually personally witnessed this myself. There'd be 10 of us late night at a Chinese restaurant, and he would literally finish everyone's leftovers. So, not that weird. He would order a large pepperoni pizza, but then sometimes he'd come back 2 or 3 hours later and order another large pepperoni pizza from me. And I was thinking, okay, he skipped breakfast or something. And, well, I found out several years later, Alfred was taking the pizzas upstairs and selling them off by the slice. And so that's why he became our CFO later at Zappos. So after the pizza business, the same roommate I was running the pizza business with, we started an internet company called Link Exchange. We specialized in online advertising, grew that to 100 or so people, and then ended up selling the company to Microsoft 2.5 years later. But what a lot of people don't know is the real reason why we ended up selling the company. And the real reason is because it just ended up not being a fun place to work at anymore, and the company culture just went completely downhill. I remember when it was just 10 of us. It was kind of your typical .com back in the day. We were working around the clock, sleeping under our desks, had no idea what day of the week it was, but it was a lot of fun and super exciting as we were growing. And as we started growing, we started hiring friends and friends of friends. And I remember there was one friend of mine that I knew from high school. He was on this cross-country road trip from New York to the Bay Area over here, and then we needed a little extra help over the weekend, and then that became a week, and then 2 weeks, and so on. And he eventually ended up joining the company. So this whole strategy of hiring friends and friends of friends worked really, really well for us until we got to about 20 people. And then we ran into a major problem. And the problem was we basically ran out of friends. So then we're thinking, okay, how do we hire people based on resumes and skill sets and interviews and so on? And we'd never done that before. We were fresh out of college. And we ended up learning, I think doing an okay job. We learned through trial and error, but we didn't know any better to pay attention to company culture. And by the time we got to 100 people, some of the people we hired were really bad for our culture. And by the time we got to 100 people, I myself dreaded getting out of bed to go to my own company, which was definitely a weird feeling. And I was thinking, like, if I felt that way, how must all the other employees feel? So that's really what led us to sell the company to Microsoft. And shortly after the sale, I left the company. Sanjay, the other co-founder, left the company. In fact, most of the early employees all left within a few months after the sale. As it turned out, we got super lucky with the timing, so it worked out well financially. And so I was thinking, okay, what should I do with my life now? And I decided to get back together with Alfred, and we formed an investment fund and invested in about 20 or so different internet companies, and Zappos just happened to be one of them. But then over the course of a year, I realized for me, investing was actually kind of boring. And I really miss being part of building something. So within a year, I ended up joining Zappos full-time, and I've been with Zappos ever since. Many of you may have heard it was just about 2 years ago that Amazon acquired Zappos, but it's actually very different from most acquisitions that Amazon has done. In most of their acquisitions, the plan is to integrate the company being acquired into the parent company, and then over the course of time, the original company kind of loses its identity and joins the mothership. Whereas for us, we told them, actually as a precondition for even talking about the possibility of doing the deal, that we would only consider it if we could remain independent, if we can continue growing the Zappos brand and our culture and our way of doing business our ways. So from our point of view, it's basically as if we swapped out our board of directors with a new one in. Instead of flying to San Francisco from Vegas once a quarter for a board meeting, we now fly to Seattle once a quarter for a 2-hour meeting, and that's the extent of my interaction with Amazon. So I'm pretty happy that they've stayed true to their word. So most people, when they think of Zappos, think of us as shoes, because that's how we started. But internally, we actually have a saying that we're a service company that just happens to sell shoes. And our hope is that 10 years from now, people won't even realize we started out selling shoes online. And in fact, today we sell a lot more than shoes. We sell clothing and housewares, beauty products, and kitchenware, and so on. And really, our goal is just to build the Zappos brand to be about the very best customer service and customer experience. And we've actually had customers email us and ask us if we could please start an airline or run the IRS. And we're not going to do either of those things this year. But 20 years from now, I wouldn't rule out a Zappos Airlines that's just about delivering the very best customer service and customer experience. So in some ways, it's analogous to Virgin, where they have a whole bunch of different businesses, airlines, music, and so on. The difference is the Virgin brand is more about being hip and cool, whereas we just want to be about the very best customer service. So our whole strategy in terms of marketing and advertising is, let's take most of this money we would have normally spent on paid advertising and paid marketing, and rather spend it on that, invest it into customer service and the customer experience, and then let our customers do the marketing for us through word of mouth. So we've grown from no sales in 1999 to 2008 was the first year we hit $1 billion in gross merchandise sales. And despite the down economy over the last few years, we've actually continued to grow at a rapid rate year over year. And the #1 driver of all that growth has been through repeat customers and word of mouth. So these are some of the questions we ask ourselves. We are constantly thinking about, how do we wow our customers? And we use the word wow a lot internally as a verb. And there's things like the free shipping both ways, or 365-day return policy. Running our call center very differently from most call centers. Most call centers, they're either viewed through an expense minimization lens, where it's all about efficiency, getting customers off the phone, or through a revenue lens, how do we generate sales? We actually view our call center through a branding lens. How do we brand ourselves to be about the very best customer service and customer experience? And that's why we don't have scripts. We don't measure performance based on how long someone's on the phone with a customer, or how quickly they get off, and so on. And so for all this focus on customer service and building our brand to be about customer service, the #1 priority of the company is actually not customer service. Our #1 priority is company culture. And our whole belief is that if we get the culture right, then most of the other stuff, like delivering great customer service or building a long-term enduring brand or business, will just become a natural byproduct of the culture. And so we do a lot on the culture side. It starts with our hiring process. For everyone that we hire, we actually do 2 sets of interviews. The first set is kind of your standard stuff done by the hiring manager and his or her team, where they'll interview for fit within the team, relevant experience, technical ability, and so on. But then we do a second set of interviews, and that's done by our HR department, looking purely for culture fit. And they have to pass both in order to be hired. So we've passed on a lot of really smart, talented people that we know can make an immediate impact on our top or bottom line. But if they're bad for our culture, we won't hire them for that reason alone. And the reverse is true, too. Even if someone's doing their specific job function perfectly fine, even if they're a superstar in that job function, if they're bad for our culture, we'll fire them for that reason alone. And performance reviews are based on, or 50% based on whether you're living or inspiring the Zappos culture in others. The other thing we do is everyone that's hired into our headquarters, doesn't matter what position, accountant, lawyer, software developer, goes through the exact same training as our call center reps. We go over company history, the importance of company culture, our philosophy about customer service, and then everyone's actually on the phone for 2 weeks taking real calls from real customers. And the reason why we have everyone go through that, regardless of position, is because if we're serious about building our brand to be about the very best customer service and customer experience, then customer service shouldn't just be a department. It should be the entire company. And the other great thing about that is during our busy Q4 holiday season, which is coming up, people from all different departments hop on the phones, and then we don't need to worry about hiring temps that may not deliver the same service level, or they may not be great for our culture. The other thing we do is everyone that's hired during that new hire class, at the end of the first week, we make an offer of, it says $2,000 here, it's actually now up to $4,000 to quit and leave the company right then and there. And that's a standing offer until the end of the training, and then we extend it a few weeks after that. And starting pay in Las Vegas for a call center rep is $11 an hour, plenty of other call centers. So it's a pretty significant amount of money, and the reason we do that is because we don't want employees there for a paycheck. We want employees that really believe in the long-term vision of the company and really feel like this is the right culture for them. There's also something we put out once a year called a culture book, which I'll make freely available to anyone that's interested. But basically, every year, I ask employees to write a few paragraphs about what the Zappos culture means to them, and except for typos, it's unedited, so it includes the good and the bad. So kind of like how on Amazon you might see customer reviews of products, these are essentially employee reviews of the company. We're also very active on Twitter. If you go to twitter.zappos.com, you can kind of get a feeling for what the culture of our company is like, because we have a page where we aggregate all the tweets together. So in terms of our brand, for at least over the next several years, we have something we internally refer to as the 3 C's: clothing, customer service, and company culture. And this is kind of the life cycle of the customer. So customers that have never heard of Zappos before, have no idea what we do, want them to know we've got a great selection of clothing, footwear, and other product categories. Once they know about that, then we want them to know we're all about delivering the very best customer service. And that's not something we tell them so much as something they experience when they see how fast our shipping is, or how easy the free shipping both ways is, or call our call center and talk to someone that truly wants to deliver a great service. And once they know about that, then we want them to know about our company culture, because that's really the platform that makes everything possible. And that's part of the reason why we actually open up our doors and offer tours to the public. So we've actually had customers email us and tell us when they get that perfect outfit or perfect pair of shoes, that Zappos is happiness in a box. So whether it's the happiness that customers feel from getting that perfect outfit or perfect pair of shoes, or the happiness that customers feel from experiencing great customer service, or the happiness that employees feel from being part of a culture where the values of the company, the corporate values, match their own personal values, the thing that we realize ties all of these 3 things together is Zappos is really just about delivering happiness, whether it's to customers or employees, or we apply that same philosophy to our vendor partners as well. So when you come for a tour, the first thing you'll see is the Zappos library. There's about 30, 40 titles in the reception area, but it's actually a giving library. One of our core values is to pursue growth and learning, and we give all these books out freely, not only to our employees, but to visitors as well. Some of the titles rotate in and out, but 2 of the titles, if you guys have not read these books, I would strongly, strongly recommend are Good to Great and Tribal Leadership. And I actually wish these books existed prior to Zappos being founded, because it would have saved us a lot of trial and error. And in fact, we even teach classes on these books to our own employees. And the reason why I think these books are really interesting and important is because the authors researched and looked at what separated the great companies in terms of long-term financial performance from just the good ones or mediocre ones. And they were actually kind of surprised by their findings. They found that the great companies had 2 important ingredients that the good ones or mediocre ones generally did not. The first ingredient was that they found the great companies all had strong cultures. And for us, we formalized the definition of our culture into 10 core values. But we actually didn't always have core values at Zappos. It wasn't until 5 or 6 years into the company that we rolled out our core values. And it was actually one of those things that a lot of us, myself included, kind of resisted in the early days, because it felt like one of those big corporate things to do. And part of the reason we felt that way, or at least why I felt that way, is because a lot of, especially bigger corporations, have these things called core values or guiding principles or so on, but the problem is usually they're very lofty sounding. They kind of read like a press release that the marketing department put out. They sound exactly the same as their competitors, and maybe you can read about it on the website, learn about it on day 1 of orientation, but then it just becomes this meaningless plaque on the lobby wall. Well, we wanted to come up with committable core values. And by committable, meaning we're actually willing to hire or fire people based on whether they're living up to those values, completely independent of their actual job performance. And when you use that criteria, it's actually a really hard list to come up with. It took us a year to come up with it, and it was, we involved the whole company. It wasn't just a few senior executives at an offsite somewhere. And so here's actually the 10 Zappos core values. And what I discovered accidentally a couple years later after we came out with these core values that I thought was really cool is if you do a Google search for any of these values by themselves and just choose one of them, in almost all cases, Zappos is the #1 search result. Whereas for most companies, pick a random company, pick a random value, do a Google search for it, and page after page after page, that company's name is nowhere to be found. So we actually have interview questions for each and every one of these values. The one that probably trips us up the most during the hiring process is the last one, be humble, because there's a lot of smart, talented people out there that are also egotistical. And for us, it's not even a question. We just won't hire them. But the conversation at a lot of other companies might be, well, this person might be kind of annoying and rub you the wrong way, but he's going to add a lot of value, and therefore we should hire this person. And that one hire may or may not bring the company culture downhill, but I think if you keep making compromises like that over and over and over again, that's why most large corporations don't have great company cultures. It's also probably the one that's hardest to actually ask an interview question for, because you can't just ask a candidate, how humble are you? And they say, I'm the most humble person in the whole wide world, hire me. So one of the ways we test this is actually, a lot of our candidates are from out of town. We'll pick them up from the airport in a Zappa shuttle, give them a tour, and then they'll spend the rest of the day interviewing. Well, at the end of the day of interviews, the recruiter will circle back to the shuttle driver and ask how he or she was treated. And it doesn't matter how well the day of interviews went. If the shuttle driver wasn't treated well, then we won't hire that person. One of my favorite interview questions is actually for core value number 4, be adventurous, creative, and open-minded. My favorite interview question in this category is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how lucky are you in life? And 1 is, I don't know why bad things always seem to happen to me. 10 is, I don't know why good things always seem to happen to me. Well, we don't want to hire the ones because they're bad luck. We don't want bad luck to find its way to Zappos. But this was actually inspired by a research study that I'd read about, where they actually asked that exact same question to a whole group of random people. So they got all sorts of different answers, and then afterwards they had them do a task. And the task was to go through a newspaper and count the number of photos that were in that newspaper. But what the participants didn't know was that it was actually a fake newspaper. And sprinkled throughout the newspaper were these headlines that would say things like, if you're reading this now, you can stop, the answer's 37, and collect an extra $100. And what they found was that the people that considered themselves unlucky in life generally never noticed the headlines. They diligently went through their assigned task and eventually came up with the right answer, whereas the people that considered themselves lucky in life generally stopped early and made that extra $100. So the takeaway is that it's not so much that people are inherently lucky or unlucky in life, but luck is really more about being open to opportunity, beyond just how the task or situation presents itself. So that's why we asked that question for core value number 4. One of our other core values, number 6, is all about transparency. And we really try to be as transparent as possible, whether it's to our customers or our employees or to our vendor partners. So for example, our vendor partners can log into our extranet system and view the exact same information our own buyers and merchandisers view, including on-hand inventory, sales, profitability, markdowns, and so on. We have a quarterly all-hands meetings where employees can ask whatever questions they want, whether it's about financials or what brands we're going to carry and so on. And then we actually live stream that to the public. So any of you can actually tune into our all-hands meetings to see what that's like. And when reporters come and visit our offices, we'll give them a tour. And then we tell them, walk around, talk to whoever you feel like, and then come find me when you're done. And the reason we do that, we actually don't have PR training or media training and so on, is because we know we've hired values match the corporate values, and we know employees understand the long-term vision of the company. So every employee is just automatically living the brand. And so reporter talks to 10 random people. They may not have the exact same sound bites and so on, but what the reporter will find is consistency in their attitude, and more importantly, authenticity in their interactions. So that's why we allow reporters or anyone else to just walk around and talk to anyone. And so one of the reactions we'll get sometimes is, especially when you see our offices, it's not your typical corporate offices, there's decorations all over the place and so on, is that, okay, happy for you, Zappos, you made the Fortune 100 best companies to work for list 3 years in a row, but the stuff you're talking about would never work at my company. And what I found really interesting from the research from those 2 books, Good to Great and Tribal Leadership, was that they found it actually doesn't matter what your values are. What matters is that you have them and you align the entire organization around them and you commit to them. And by committing to them, meaning you're willing to hire or fire based on them independent of their actual job performance. So I'm not out here in the book. The purpose of the book is not to help spread the Zappos culture or our values to other companies, because in a lot of cases, or most cases, that would probably be the wrong decision. But the message is actually figure out values that you can commit to and align the organization around. So one of the other reactions we get sometimes, and I'll make this presentation available, is, oh, maybe this only works for internet companies or technology companies. And so we actually have a separate website and entity called Zappos Insights. If you go to zapposinsights.com, there's anything from a monthly video subscription service to you can sign up for these one-day and two-day seminars where companies from all over the world fly in and we help them figure out their values. And so one of the stories in there that I thought was really cool is about the Atlanta Refrigeration Company. They're based in Atlanta, Georgia, and they do refrigeration repairs out in the field. So in some ways, you can't think of a more opposite company or industry than Zappos. And they went through, and then a few months later, after focusing on making customers happier and making employees happier, and it was really neat. They even sent us before and after pictures of their offices and really focused on company culture. They reported back that not only is everyone happier, but their revenues and profits are up in a down economy doing refrigeration repairs. So for us, it's just been really exciting to see this whole concept of happiness as a business model spread to other companies and organizations and industries. So going back to the research from Good to Great and Tribal Leadership, I said the authors researched and found that there were two ingredients that separated the great companies in terms of long-term financial performance from just the good ones or mediocre ones. The first one is that they all had strong cultures. The second one I actually found really counterintuitive. The second ingredient they found was that the great companies all had a vision that had a higher purpose, beyond just money or profits or being number one in the market. And the weird thing about that, and ironic thing about that, is that by actually having a higher purpose, that's what enabled these companies to actually generate more profits than their peers and competitors. So sometimes at entrepreneur conferences, people will approach me and ask me, what's a good market to go into where I can make a lot of money? And my advice to them is, rather than have money be your primary motivator, think about what would you be so passionate about doing that you'd be happy doing it for 10 years, even if you never made any money from it, and that's what you should be doing. And if you do that, it will actually greatly increase your chances of making more money, because your passion is what's going to get you through the tough times, and every business has its ups and downs, and your passion is going to rub off onto employees and customers and your business partners and so on. So I like to say chase the vision, not the money. There was a movie that came out several years ago called Notorious. Did anyone in this room see this very important movie? No. This is actually, I think, the best response I've ever seen, because normally one person raises their hand. I thought I was the only person that saw this movie because I think it only lasted a week in the theater. But in this movie, Puff Daddy says to rapper Biggie Smalls, also known as Notorious B.I.G., "Don't chase the paper, chase the dream." I just wanted an excuse to use this picture in a business presentation. So if you're an entrepreneur, think about what would you be so passionate about doing that you'd be happy doing it for 10 years, even if you never made any money from it. And that's what you should be doing. And if you have employees that report to you, think about what is the larger vision or greater purpose in the work beyond just money or profits or being number one in the market or beating the competition. There's a lot of books and consultants that talk about how to motivate employees. And kind of some of the traditional techniques for motivating employees are incentives, for example. If you do X, then I'll give you Y. And if you do more of X, then I'll give you more of Y. Or recognition is another way to motivate employees. But what we accidentally stumbled into and learned through the years at Zappos is that there's a huge, huge difference between motivation and inspiration. And if you can inspire your employees through a vision that has a higher purpose, beyond just money or profits or being number one in a market, and if you can inspire your employees by having values, not just stated values, but actually practice values that match their own personal values, then you can accomplish so much more, and you don't really need to worry about the motivation part of it. We found that just kind of takes care of itself. So this is kind of the evolution of our brand, when you can just see how we start out just thinking, oh, let's be the market leader, and then that evolved into customer service and really focusing on culture and different types of customer service, really focusing on the high-touch type of customer service instead of just the high-tech. And then a couple years ago, we decided, actually, let's just simplify the vision, because customer service is all just about making customers happy. Company culture is about making employees happy. If we just simplify the vision into just being about delivering happiness, what will happen? And then the funny thing about simplifying the vision is it actually opened up more business opportunities for us, like Zappos Insights, which is now about helping other companies make their customers and employees happy, and is its own fast-growing division. And in fact, that's actually growing faster than the rest of Zappos. So wanted to, actually, I got to skip over a couple slides, but take a step back and actually ask all of you to participate in this one question. And think about it for yourself personally. What is your goal in life? And really think about it for yourself, because sometimes when I meet new people, I like to ask this question because it's really interesting on the kind of variety of responses that I get back. And so for some people, they might say, well, my goal is to grow a company. And then some people might say, oh, it's to be healthy. And then I'll ask them why. And so whatever answer you came up with for your own personal goal in life, ask yourself why. And then I'll get another set of answers like retire early or so I can run faster. And then I'll ask why again. So whatever answer you came up with for yourself, ask why again. And then people say, oh, so I can spend more time with family, or so I can run a marathon. But what I find really interesting is if you ask yourself why over and over and over again, almost everyone winds up with the same answer eventually. Like whatever your goal in life is, usually the reason people are pursuing it is because they believe that ultimately it'll make them happier. So a few years ago, having nothing at all to do with Zappos, this was just kind of a side hobby I was doing on weekends, I started reading all these books and articles about the science of happiness. And what's interesting is actually this field of research is relatively new. It didn't exist prior to 1998. Prior to 1998, most of psychology was about looking at people that had something wrong with them and trying to figure out how to make them more normal. Right? But almost nobody bothered to study how to take normal people and make them happier. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And as I started reading more and more of the research that's been done, one of the consistent findings in the research is that people are actually very bad at predicting what will make them happy on a long-term sustainable basis. Most people think, oh, once I achieve this or once I get this, then I'll be happy. When the research actually shows that's not true. Like look at lottery winners, for example. Their happiness right before winning the lottery and their happiness level a year later. And a year later, it's the same or maybe even a little bit lower than what it was before. So I started thinking, well, at Zappos, if we're trying to make customers happy and trying to make employees happy, it's actually not as simple as just asking them, what can we do better? How can we make you happier? Because the research shows they don't actually know. And there's a lot of science behind some of the stuff we do at Zappos in terms of website conversion, repeat customer metrics, and customer acquisition, and so on. And so if our goal is to make customers and employees happy, what if some % of the time was actually spent just reading up on the research that's been done on the science of happiness? And I was thinking, how could that help not only myself personally, but actually help the business? And so many people go through their entire lives kind of putting off that happiness at the end, thinking, okay, one day I'm going to do this thing that I actually care about or that I'm passionate about. And sadly, for many people, that day never comes because it's always, oh, I'm going to do that one day. And then of the people that do get there, a lot of them find is actually the happiness they got to is actually much shorter lasting than they kind of had envisioned in their minds their entire lifetime. So what if by reading up on the science of happiness, you can actually get to the happiness much more efficiently and faster? So I just want to share a few different frameworks of happiness that I thought were really interesting to me from the research that's been found. So first framework is that happiness is really just about 4 things: perceived control, perceived progress, connectedness, meaning the number and depth of your relationships, and being part of something bigger than yourself that has meaning to you. And what I think is really interesting is you can actually apply this not only to your own life, but to business as well. So for example, at Zappos, for perceived progress, in our merchandising department, we used to hire people at entry level, and then they get trained, certified, and so on, and then 18 months after that, they'd get a promotion. And then they get additional training and certification and then get another promotion 18 months after that and become a buyer, which at Zappos is a pretty big thing. So total time to go from entry level to buyer was 3 years. Well, we changed that a few years ago so that instead of a promotion every 18 months, we gave them smaller promotions every 6 months. They still had to go through the exact same training and mentorship and certification, and it still took them exactly 3 years to become a buyer, but we found employees were suddenly a lot happier because there was that ongoing sense of perceived progress. And it cost the company nothing to implement that. Another framework is Maslow's hierarchy. There's a great book called Peak, P-A-K, by Chip Conley. And he actually takes these Maslow's and condenses it down to 3 levels and applies it to customers, employees, and investors. So for example, the 3 levels in terms of how employees think of their work are, do they think of their work as a job, career, or calling? And our whole goal is to move employees up that pyramid, and we still want them to be Zappos employees 10 years from now. And the only way that anyone's going to be an employee for that long is if they feel like they're continuing to grow both personally and professionally. So that's why we invest so much in the training and mentorship of our employees. And then finally, I wanted to share the 3 types of happiness: pleasure, engagement, and meaning. The first type I like to call the rock star type of happiness because it's all about chasing the next high. As it turns out, it's great if you can sustain it. The problem is it's really hard to sustain unless you're basically a rock star. And what the research has shown is that as soon as the source of stimuli goes away that's giving you that high, as soon as that goes away, your happiness level just plummets instantly and goes back to wherever it was before. So out of these 3 types, it's actually the shortest lasting type of happiness. The second type is called flow, and there's a book by the same name, and we've all experienced this. It's about those moments in time when you're so into whatever you're doing. For some people, it might be painting. For other people, it might be running. That time just flies. 3 hours pass, and it seems like it's only been 20 minutes. Other characteristics associated with it are you lose a sense of self-consciousness or even self, and professional athletes refer to it as being in the zone. And kind of the strategy there is notice when it happens, because it happens to all of us, just different things trigger it. And then think about maybe you should change your job or your environment or who you hang out with or where you live to have those occurrences of flow happen more frequently. And out of these 3 types, it's actually the second longest lasting type of happiness. And the last type is about being part of something bigger than yourself that has meanings to you. So for some people, that might mean volunteering for their favorite charity, for example. And out of these 3 types, it's actually the longest lasting type of happiness. And what I find interesting is most people go through life chasing after the first type, thinking if once I could sustain that, which as it turns out is next to impossible, then I'll worry about the second type, and then if I ever get around to it, I'll think about the third type one day. Whereas the proper strategy based on this research data is actually you should figure out the third type of happiness first, and then layer on top of that the second type. And anytime you experience the first, that's just kind of icing on the cake. So these are some books that I would recommend. Anyone that wants a copy of this presentation, just send me an email, tony@deliveringhappiness.com. Oh, also that culture book that I talked about earlier, it's a physical book, so you need your physical mailing address. We also have a website set up for tours. You can just go to tours.zappos.com next time you're coming to Vegas and come for a tour. It's pretty fun. So just want to end with, the title of my book is Delivering Happiness. The subtitle is A Path to Profits, Passion, and Purpose. And the reason why I chose that to be the subtitle is because the research has shown you actually need all 3 of those to build a long-term, sustainable, growing business. And I think too many companies focus on just the profits part of it. They either forget about or ignore or don't care about the passion and purpose part of it, and that actually ends up hurting their ability to generate more profits in the long term. And kind of my weird aha moment was when I was reading up on the whole science of happiness research, was that happiness is really about being able to combine pleasure, passion, and purpose. And so for me, that was almost kind of the sign to what kind of nudged me to actually write the book and think, okay, maybe this is the right time to really spread this whole idea of happiness as a business model to other companies and organizations and industries beyond just Zappos. So just want to leave you with thinking about what percent of your time do you want to spend reading up on the science of happiness. How can that help yourself individually and also help your business and your brand? And if the research shows that companies with a higher purpose actually generate more profits in the long term, And if the research shows that individuals with a higher purpose are actually happier, think about what is your company's higher purpose and what is your own higher purpose. And if through this presentation you've been inspired to either focus more on customer service and the customer experience to make customers happier, or you've been inspired to focus more on company culture to make employees happier, or you've been inspired just to read up a little bit on this whole science of happiness field just to make yourself individually happier, if any of those things have happened, then I'll have done my part in helping us achieve our own higher purpose, which is all about delivering happiness to the world. Thank you very much.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you very much, Tony. That was an amazing presentation. And you said that the study of happiness what came around 1998, is that right? So I don't know if it's any coincidence, but cloud computing services really started taking off in about 99 and 2000. So I don't know if that ties in at all. But really exciting stuff. I'm actually a major Zappos. I'm probably a top 10 customer. I don't know if I'm on any leaderboard, but that's where we get these shoes. And you've actually saved my life a couple of times. I tend to run out of laundry, so I'll order boxers on the website. And then because of your overnighting, they get to me pretty quickly. So Zappos is really incredible, obviously changing how we think about customer service. And at Box, our vision, again, is to make our customers as successful as possible with the product and with the platform. And so we really encourage you to give us that feedback around what we can do better as a company and how we can continue to improve the service, how we can continue to improve the quality of our relationship and the quality of the technology. So we really, really welcome all of that feedback. My email is just aaron@box.net if you do have any of that feedback. And otherwise, please feel free to contact any representative or any contact that you have at Box. So really, really appreciate everyone's attendance. This is our first customer conference. We think it's been an amazing time. We hope everybody has had a great time. It's not over, obviously. We have a really exciting after party. We couldn't get, unfortunately, we couldn't get Notorious B.I.G., even though he's been an apparent theme of the event. But Third Eye Blind is really, really awesome. And again, the best part of obviously building a Box is really getting the feedback from you guys. Being the early adopters of the platform and of the service, we really, really require and need your feedback on what we can be doing. We're super excited that you guys have been so visionary to be able to implement the service and move to the cloud. So thank you so much, and we're doing our best to build a smarter enterprise. So thanks, guys. See you.